They finally did it. After 300 years of searching, archaeologists pinned down the location of the lost land of the white jaguar, the city of Maya hidden in the wild jungles of Mexico. It all kicked off back in the 1500s with the Lacandon Maya. These guys were some super tough survivors who just didn't quit. When their main capital, Lacamtun, fell to the Spanish in 1586, most people would have called it game over. But not the Lacandon. Nope, they packed up, headed deeper into the rainforest, and built their last stronghold, Sacbalan. It was a hidden fortress of stone temples, twisty jungle trails, and howler monkeys acting like noisy little guards. For over 100 years, the Lacandon managed to keep their traditions alive there, far from European control. Then, in 1695, history came crashing in. A Spanish friar named Diego de Ribas stumbled into Sacbalan. And yeah, that was basically the beginning of the end. Soon after, the Spanish took over. By 1721, the Maya had abandoned Sacbalan. The jungle didn't waste time. It swallowed the place whole, with roots tearing into walls and vines smothering plazas. The city didn't just disappear, it got eaten alive. For the next 300 years, Sacbalan turned into more of a myth than a memory. A name archaeologists and explorers would whisper, secretly hoping to find it one day. Plenty of expeditions tried to track it down, but the rainforest is sneaky. Every path looks identical, maps fall apart in the humidity, and even GPS can't cut through the thick green ceiling. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was alive, covered in thorns, and yeah, crawling with jaguars that would happily make you lunch. So how did the scientists crack the mystery? One word: a letter from the 17th century. The letter by Diego de Ribas described all the routes, rivers, and trails leading to Sacbalan. It showed in every detail the journey of the soldiers who walked 4 days to the Lacandon River after leaving Sacbalan. Then they sailed for 2 days and arrived at the church El Encuentro de Cristo, left their canoes, and continued on foot to Lake Petén Itzá in Guatemala. This was already detailed enough, but the scientists needed to pinpoint the exact location with geographic information systems. They took into account vegetation layers and how much each person was carrying to map an approximate range where Sacbalan should be. They fed this information to GIS and calculated where the city should be. And bingo, it worked. Archaeologists traveled through the jungle and found stone temples rising like broken teeth from the earth. There were also some tools and ceramics, and a Spanish church right in the middle of the ruins. The discovery isn't just about cool ruins, it rewrites history. For decades, people assumed the Lacandon simply scattered after Lacamtun fell, but Sacbalan proves they regrouped, fought, and preserved their culture for over a century more. It's like discovering the final chapter of a book we thought ended too soon. There's also irony here. The Spanish friar who revealed Sacbalan helped doom it. Yet his letter, centuries later, also helped save its memory. Today, the ruins sit inside a biosphere reserve, protected by the same jungle that once hid them. Tourists can't just waltz in. It's raw, tangled, alive. The city breathes again, but on its own terms. Scientists just uncovered another lost city, buried under the thick jungles of Mexico. It had been hiding there for 600 years. The place is called Genola, and it's massive, about 360 hectares with more than 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, its own network of roads, and a super organized city plan. Because it was so deep in the jungle, you'd never realize how huge it really was unless you spent years hiking through it. But modern tech swooped in to save the day, using LiDAR, a kind of laser scanning tool. Researchers flew over the site, and in just 2 hours, they had a full 3D map of the entire city. Genola was built sometime between 1350 and 1521, back in pre-Columbian times, and it used to be buzzing with life. It was a major hub for the Zapotec people, who had been around in the region since about 600 BCE. Families there lived in homes with big central patios surrounded by rooms, and as they got new members, they just add more rooms and stretch their houses out. They even used the mountains around them as natural walls and channeled mountain water for drainage. A lot of their buildings are still standing, which is wild considering how much time has passed. By the late 1400s, the Zapotec were real powerhouses along the Pacific coast. They even fought off the Aztecs, who were constantly trying to expand. At Genola, they survived a brutal 7-month siege. But even though hiding in the mountains kept them safe, it wasn't perfect. They didn't have enough fresh water or farmland to feed everyone. Just 12 miles away, the smaller city of Tehuantepec had what they needed. So the Zapotec moved there right before the Spanish arrived in 1521. What the scientists have seen so far is just scratching the surface. That LiDAR scan revealed more than 1,000 buildings, and archaeologists are planning years of research to figure it all out. Instead of digging everything up and risking damage, they'll use advanced scanning tech to keep studying the city safely. Alright, now let's hop across the world to Egypt, where archaeologists stumbled on a whole lost city called Emit, tucked away in the eastern Nile Delta. The place was buried under layers of mud, water, and time, hiding in a swamp that's been shifting and changing for thousands of years. Scientists first noticed it from way up high in faint little clusters of mud brick foundations in satellite images. The shapes looked shaky and ghost-like, but too neat to be natural. So they followed the patterns down on the ground, started digging, and the city started coming back to life. They found multi-story tower houses, basically mini skyscrapers of the ancient world. They had multiple floors, thick foundations, and could handle some serious weight. That kind of vertical living is super rare in Egypt, especially outside the Nile Delta. It showed that people in Emit weren't just spreading across the land, but stacking upward, which means the city was packed, carefully planned, and way more urban than anyone thought for that time. And it wasn't just fancy housing either. Archaeologists also uncovered a grain processing center with paved work areas, animal pens, and organized spaces for food production. Clearly, this was a city with a real economy running behind it. Not far from there, they spotted a ceremonial road that once led to a temple for Wadjet, Emit's patron deity. But later on, other buildings got plunked down over the road, which shows that Wadjet's worship faded over time. Still, the ruins coughed up some amazing relics, a green faience little funerary figurine, and a stela showing Harpocrates perched on crocodiles and gripping snakes. He was the Greek spin on Horus, deity of silence, secrets, and the newborn sun. And there was even a bronze sistrum, an ancient Egyptian musical instrument decorated with twin heads of Hathor. Turns out, Emit was active from around the 4th century BCE onward, stretching from Egypt's late period into the Roman era. Its location along trade routes made it a magnet for merchants and pilgrims visiting Wadjet's temple. So it wasn't just hanging on, it was thriving, connecting, trading, and adapting with the times. And this isn't just another dusty ruin. Emit is giving us a window into everyday life, religion, and urban planning in the Delta, which we've always known way less about compared to the big pyramids and tombs.
Back in 1912, British newspapers were buzzing with one bold claim: the first humans appeared in Britain, not Africa. It felt like history itself had been rewritten, and everyone bought into it. Crowds cheered, scientists raised their glasses, and the tiny village of Piltdown in Sussex suddenly became the spotlight for what was hailed as the greatest evolutionary discovery ever. It all happened thanks to this guy, Charles Dawson, a curious amateur archaeologist who was dreaming of making a name in science. He claimed he had found bone fragments of a transitional creature between apes and humans. Dawson teamed up with Arthur Smith Woodward, a respected geologist from the Natural History Museum, And together, they assembled fragments of skulls, teeth, and even primitive tools. They unveiled their find, the Piltdown Man, to the Geological Society, and for decades, everyone believed it. Textbooks even rewrote human evolution around it, and entire generations memorized it as pure truth. But here's the twist. In 1949, new technology to determine the precise age of objects came along, and things just didn't add up. Tests showed that the skull was only about 50,000 years old, not hundreds of thousands. Then came an even bigger shock. The skull and jaw didn't even belong to the same species. Someone had combined a human skull with the jaw of an ape, probably an orangutan. And even worse, they filed down the teeth to make them look more human and stained the bones to match the surrounding gravel. A Frankenstein fossil and its creator managed to trick the entire world into believing they'd found a missing piece of humanity's puzzle. So Dawson went down in scientific history, but probably not the way he was hoping to. And he wasn't the only one. Some did it for money, others for fame. In the late 19th century Paris, museums were collecting ancient treasures like they were trading cards. When a stunning gold tiara, supposedly belonging to an ancient Scythian king, Ctesiphon, appeared on the market, the Louvre had to have it. It was breathtaking, detailed, majestic, fit for a ruler. The museum proudly paid a fortune and displayed it as a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship. Then came the heartbreak. A few years later, an entrepreneurial goldsmith from Odessa read about the Louvre's glorious find and burst out laughing. He recognized the tiara because he made it with his own hands. It was a modern piece, a commission he created for local dealers, except they never told him they planned to pass it off as an ancient treasure. The Louvre was humiliated. Once again, the whole world believed in a beautiful lie, and the goldsmith who had just made the museum look ridiculous ended up famous in the world of art. The tiara still holds the Guinness World Record for the greatest goldsmith fraud of all time. Another story of a well-planned scientific hoax takes us to a quiet town of Cardiff, New York, a couple of decades before the Louvre incident. In 1869, workers digging a well struck something hard and enormous. They uncovered what looked like a petrified 10-foot-tall man lying in the earth. Crowds poured in from miles around to see it. Preachers called it proof of the biblical giants mentioned in Genesis. Scientists debated whether it was fossilized or divine. Within days, the Cardiff giant became a sensation. People paid good money to see it, 50 cents a ticket, which was a lot back then. Later, it turned out that a man named George Hull carved the mysterious giant from gypsum after an argument with a Methodist reverend. Hull just wanted to prove how easily you can fool people, especially religious believers, unlike himself. So he buried the fake giant, and it worked too well. Even after experts exposed the hoax, visitors didn't care. They kept coming because they wanted to believe. Over time, the giant changed ownership several times. You can now see it at the Fenimore Farm and Country Village Museum in Cooperstown, New York. Well, speaking of museums, you might have seen crystal skulls that glow under light, presented as sacred artifacts from Mesoamerican temples. Yes, that skull from an Indiana Jones movie with ancient Aztec powers or even extraterrestrial energy. So, museums displayed such skulls proudly until scientists at the British Museum and the Smithsonian decided to give them a closer look, and what they found shattered the myth. They found that the skulls were made with modern rotary tools and abrasives that ancient carvers didn't have. In other words, someone in the 1800s or 1900s made them using modern machinery and fooled the world. They weren't messages from deities or some advanced creatures from space, just very fancy paperweights that tricked so many people into believing in some ancient superpowers. Well, let's jump several decades closer to the present day, shall we? In the 1960s, Yale University revealed what looked like a discovery that could rewrite world history: a 15th century map showing North America labeled Vinland. It meant Vikings had mapped America long before Columbus. The headlines were sensational. The idea was romantic. explorers crossing icy seas century before Europe even knew America existed. But something just didn't add up. The parchment was generally medieval, but the ink wasn't. Decades of testing revealed it contained titanium dioxide, a pigment invented in the 20th century. In 2021, Yale confirmed it. The Vinland map was a modern forgery, drawn over old parchment to make it look ancient. It wasn't proof of Viking genius, but rather of human cleverness on one side and the tendency to be easily persuaded on the other. And when we speak of persuasion, you don't have to try too hard when a really trustworthy source like National Geographic shares something, right? Well, in 1999, it presented what it thought was the ultimate discovery – a fossil that bridged the gap between dinosaurs and birds. It was called Archaeoraptor, and it was going to change everything we knew about evolution. The fossil came from China, and on first glance, it was perfect. A dinosaur tail, bird-like wings, and bones that seemed to tell the story of flight's evolution. But soon, paleontologists started whispering. The bones didn't quite line up. CT scans revealed the ugly truth. It was literally glued together from parts of different species. A dinosaur tail from one fossil, a bird body from another. Someone had Frankensteined the fossils to make a more valuable specimen. The embarrassment hit hard, especially for National Geographic, which had built an entire story around a fake the world liked to believe. Now, if you think scientific hoaxes are all in the past because of all the 20th century high-tech, here's a surprise for you. In 2020, the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. made a stunning confession. All 16 fragments of its prized Dead Sea Scroll collection were modern forgeries. They'd spent millions acquiring what they thought were sacred 2,000-year-old texts, only to learn they were made of ancient leather painted with modern ink. The forgery was so advanced that even experts were fooled at first. But after detailed forensic tests, it became clear the holy relics were anything but holy. It wasn't just about money, it was about faith. Thousands of visitors had stood in front of those glass cases, feeling awe, reverence, and connection, only to learn it was a show built on lies. And finally, it's time for one of the eeriest hoaxes of all. In 2000, a mummy surfaced in Pakistan, claiming to be a 26-year-old Persian princess, the daughter of Xerxes. They found her in a gilded sarcophagus, wrapped in golden robes. Her face was eerily well preserved. Archaeologists were stunned, but something about her looked wrong. CT scans, linguistic analysis, and radiocarbon dating revealed the horrifying truth. The mummy wasn't ancient at all. She was a modern woman, and someone likely took her life and then mummified her to sell as a fake relic. Well, yikes. The story went from exciting to tragic overnight and broke many hearts. What was supposed to be a royal miracle turned out to be a human crime and yet another lie. All these stories have one thing in common: hope. People want to believe. They want to touch the past, to find proof that connects them to something bigger. Whether it's scientists looking for the missing link, museums wanting fame, or believers searching for signs of faith, we all crave wonder. History is full of tricksters, and sometimes the best stories come from the fakes that fooled us all. Way down at the bottom of the world is so icy and remote that even asking, "Are there roads in Antarctica?" sounds silly. But the answer is not as simple as you'd think. It's not like no one gave it a shot. Back in the early 2000s, the United States gambled with Antarctica road construction on a massive scale. They tried creating a 1,000-mile ice highway meant to connect the coast to the middle of the continent. McMurdo, located on Ross Island, is the largest settlement in Antarctica. It works as a temporary home for up to 1,000 people during peak season. The South Pole Station is at the other end, and it's the southernmost spot where anyone lives. Basically, these two stations are the backbone of Antarctic logistics and supply routes. Usually, everything scientists needed at the pole had to be flown in, which is expensive and risky. One bad storm and the whole operation can be grounded for weeks. The ice highway was supposed to be a dependable overland route for transporting tons of supplies safely across the continent, even when planes were stuck on the ground. On the Antarctica map, it looks simple enough. Draw a straight line, smooth out some snow, and haul fuel and supplies instead of flying them in. It sounded ambitious, but well worth the effort. It could save millions in fuel alone. All they needed to do was keep the surface level. But beneath the snow was layers of soft powder and hidden crevasses, not to mention the constantly shifting ice that moved like a slow, frozen river. Bulldozers struggled and tractors moved slowly like slugs. Whenever the wind blew, the path they made was soon covered by fresh snow. It seemed to them like the continent was doing it on purpose. The crews working there lived in sled-mounted insulated modules and mobile shops. Their days started with engines chilled or stiff, requiring preheating before work. Doing laundry was one of the greatest challenges of the entire adventure. By the end of 2005, the route had its first full traverse, but the real challenge became maintaining it. The path runs through sheer zones, and new cracks open every season, forcing crews to rebuild and repair repeatedly. Eventually, it felt less like they were creating a road and more like they were just trying to keep up with the Antarctic weather and temperature. In the end, the highway wasn't exactly what it was supposed to be. But that doesn't mean it was a failure or a waste of time. Quite the contrary. What came out of the mission is what's now known as the South Pole Traverse. It's a seasonal land route that still supplies the pole today. It's not a road with asphalt or traffic signs, but it has become the most important route. Every southern summer, a small convoy of tracked tractors sets off from McMurdo Station, towing long trains of sleds toward the South Pole. They follow the same trail that the first crews carved out about 20 years ago. The route changes length every year and has grown from 1,028 miles to 1,030 miles. The journey takes from 25 to 40 days of steady crawling, hauling fuel and supplies that would otherwise require dozens of flights. This slow caravan saves millions and avoids weather risks. In the end, the traverse turned out to be more than just a supply route. It was a testing ground for Antarctica infrastructure engineering. It became a proving ground for how to survey, groom, and maintain over-ice routes. But for now, the route survives only because people keep fighting to hold it together. Leave it alone for a season or two, and the ice will simply take it back. In Antarctica, abandoned equipment and structures can slowly vanish under accumulating ice and snow. Entire stations have become buried over decades, and some vehicles were rediscovered, partially buried and later lost from view again. As time goes on, snow and ice can build up so much that they can completely cover up machinery, making it difficult to find without some serious digging. At minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit, the cold becomes an engineer's nightmare. Jet fuel turns into jelly, batteries die within minutes, and steel becomes brittle enough to snap like a candy bar. In those temperatures, even breathing feels mechanical. Moisture from your breath freezes on your eyelashes, and any exposed skin can end up with frostbite very quickly. The ice is fascinating. It moves like a conveyor belt, carrying everything to the sea. Anything trapped in it, crates, vehicles, or even buildings, drifts slowly, sometimes miles away from where it began. And while the ice itself seems alive, there's other interesting geological stuff to discover. Close to some of these supply routes is Blood Falls, a waterfall flowing in a shocking blood-red stream. It's not a scene from a horror movie. The color comes from iron-rich, salty water trapped under the ice for millions of years, turning red the moment it hits the air. The continent has over 400 subglacial lakes that we know about, tucked away under thick ice. Many of these lakes fill and drain regularly, creating water flows that can make glaciers slide more easily and change how they move. It's also a gold mine for meteorite hunters. Thousands of meteorites are found each year on the ice. Antarctica isn't just a frozen wasteland. It's one gigantic outdoor laboratory. Scientists come here to study everything from climate change and atmospheric chemistry to cosmic rays and meteorites. Astronomers love it because of the bone-dry and stable air, perfect for telescopes that peer into deep space. Geologists dig through ancient rock formations that reveal how continents once fit together, while glaciologists drill deep into the ice to read Earth's past climates like pages in a frozen diary. Even biologists face the cold to study ancient resilient microbes and penguin colonies, hoping to understand how life survives in the harshest conditions on the planet. The few people who live here, mostly researchers, engineers, and mechanics, move around like cautious astronauts. Every trip is logged and every mile planned. Without regular roads, getting around Antarctica takes a mix of creativity and stubbornness. Most roads are temporary snowpaths, flagged to avoid hidden drifts. Around McMurdo, short ice roads appear each season to haul cargo, then vanish as the ice melts. Antarctica's transportation challenges are the most unique on our planet. Regular vehicles just can't handle it out here. That's why most everything runs on tracks, crawling along at a jogger's pace while pulling sleds packed with supplies. Air travel is really what keeps things moving. Big cargo planes touch down on temporary runways made of packed snow or ice. There are also smaller ski-equipped aircraft, which is something you don't see every day. But when winter sets in, seasonal runways shift, crack, or drift and have to be re-established. Even the ships that bring in food and fuel each summer don't hang around. They cut a narrow path through the sea ice, unload, and get out before the ocean freezes up again. When resupply ships arrive, the crews rush to unload everything before the ocean refreezes, working around the clock. Everything gets stacked on the ice like a temporary warehouse that must disappear before the sea locks itself shut for the season. Antarctica is currently protected by the Antarctic Treaty System and the Madrid Protocol, which together classify the entire continent as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. Those agreements ban mining, permanent development, and anything that could harm the environment. Right now, the tough conditions keep most people away, and that's a good thing for the environment. A permanent road could change everything. Bring in more tourists and more activity, and the ice would struggle to wipe away human presence. That's why even a short snow trail needs official approval. Every move is watched, and every footprint has to be justified. In the end, the better question isn't are there roads in Antarctica, but should there be? Every attempt to build one, from the Great Ice Highway to today's seasonal routes, proves expensive and even pointless. That's why Antarctica road construction today isn't about building something permanent. It's about keeping scientists supplied so they can make amazing discoveries, such as drilling ice cores that trap ancient air dating back 800,000 years. Ooh, mysterious mountain ranges hidden under thousands of tons of ice. Bizarre transparent creatures with see-through skin, singing snow plains. Antarctica has its own terrifying secrets. And now, a mysterious ice hole the size of Switzerland that keeps popping open. And scientists have finally figured out why. This hole, called the Maud Rise Polynya, was first spotted in 1974 and 1976 in the Weddell Sea. Since then, it's been kind of playing hard to get. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it disappears for years. And when it does show up, it mysteriously changes size. For decades, researchers were trying to figure out what makes it form. Then, in 2016 and 2017, the Polynya went absolutely massive, more than 30,000 square miles. The hole stuck around for several weeks during winters. It was the first time since the 1970s that the Weddell Sea had such a huge, long-lasting Polynya. Here's the deal with Antarctic sea ice. In summer, the ice is at its smallest, around 1 million square miles. Yeah, that's considered small. By winter, it spreads to a whopping 7 million square miles, covering about 4% of Earth's surface in weird white tiles. Most of this ice grows during the weeks-long polar night on the floating ice shelves around the continent. These holes in the ice, called polynyas, usually form when strong winds from inland push the ice tiles apart. That same cold wind also freezes more seawater inside the hole, adding extra chunks to the ice sheet. But the Maud Rise polynya isn't near the coast, where those winds normally help make holes. Out in the open ocean, holes like this are rare. Add in the fact that ice across the Southern Ocean has been shrinking. No wonder scientists are left bewildered. What exact conditions are creating this stubborn giant ice hole? To crack the mystery, the scientists dove into a mountain of data: satellites, floating sensors, even info from tagged marine animals. Plus, they had years of past observations from other researchers. And they found something unusual. In 2016 and 2017, the Weddell Sea's circular ocean current, called the Weddell Gyre, was stronger than usual. That extra punch made it easier for salty, warmer water from deep below to reach the surface. The Maud Rise polynya sits above an underwater mountain called Maud Rise. During those big polynya years, the stronger current caused salt to gather around this submerged peak. On the surface, the wind whipped over the ice, creating a corkscrew effect. It literally pulled that salty water up from below. The extra salt lowered the freezing point of the surface water, allowing the Maud Rise polynya to form and stick around. Polynyas are really important for the planet. The dense salty water formed in these holes can travel huge distances, spreading across the global ocean and affecting climates everywhere. But these magnificent holes aren't the only cool and mysterious phenomena Antarctica is famous for. How about underground lakes? Or shall I say under-ice lakes? Because there are entire lakes hidden under Antarctica's thick ice. Scientists first found them back in 1970 using radar, and now they think there are around 400 lakes tucked under around 2 miles of ice in the explored areas. These lakes likely formed after Antarctica broke off from Gondwanaland, the ancient supercontinent. Surprisingly, the water in the lakes doesn't freeze because the ice above presses down too hard. Hey, it's physics, bro! The biggest of them all is Lake Vostok, discovered in the 1990s. It sits a bit more than 2 miles below the ice. Scientists have drilled down to take samples, and the water they pulled up was about 26 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the lake had been trapped under ice for over 20 million years. There's also Lake Williams. In 2014, scientists made a lit discovery there. They found a thriving colony of microorganisms nearly a mile under the ice. Those tiny creatures never saw sunlight or fresh air. Instead, they used methane and ammonium as energy to grow. Another marvel hides in plain sight in the McMurdo Dry Valley. It's a waterfall that looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Bright crimson water, like blood gushing from a wound in the ice, pours down 5 stories from Taylor Glacier into Lake Bonny. Ooh, spooky. But there's actually a scientific reason behind it. The water that feeds Blood Falls used to be part of a salty lake. Now, it's completely cut off from the atmosphere because glaciers formed on top of it. Trapped more than 1,300 feet underground, the water has become super salty, 3 times saltier than seawater, and it can't freeze. This underground water is also packed with iron and completely lacks oxygen and sunlight. When it slowly seeps through a crack in the glacier and hits the open air, the iron oxidizes, basically rusts, and turns the water that eerie dark red. With such creepy landscapes, Antarctica might look like a frozen wasteland, freezing cold, almost no rain, and winds that could knock you off your feet. The coldest Earth's temperatures ever was recorded there, minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And still, Antarctica is actually home to some seriously bizarre wildlife. For the longest time, scientists thought nothing could survive under all that ice. Turns out, they were very wrong. There are all sorts of creatures that have adapted to the brutal environment. Tiny microbes, crustaceans, colossal squid, and spiders so big their legs could cover a dinner plate. Giant worms with shiny golden bristles and huge sharp-toothed jaws also lurk under the ice. And then there's the ice fish, a completely see-through fish with huge eyes and organs you can literally see through its skin. These fish have built-in antifreeze proteins to survive the freezing waters, and they can't live anywhere warmer. Even stranger, they don't have hemoglobin, the protein that makes our blood red. In other words, they survive without the stuff that literally keeps most animals alive. But Antarctica wasn't always the frozen desert we know today. Millions of years ago, before the Ice Age, it was actually warm, lush, and full of life, maybe even home to ancient civilizations. Hard to imagine, huh? Scientists figured this out after finding fossilized wood, tropical tree remains, and leaf impressions, all pointing to the existence of rainforests. On top of that, they've uncovered fossils of marine animals, birds, and dinosaurs from the Cretaceous period. Even tiny creatures left their mark. Fossilized beetle wings from 14 to 20 million years ago, single-cell fossils, and, astonishingly, 50-million-year-old sperm cells preserved in the egg case of an extinct worm. So now, it probably won't shock you when I tell you that beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheets, there's a massive hidden mountain range. The Gamburtsi Mountains stretch for 745 miles and rise to almost 10,000 feet, about the third the height of Mount Everest. And all this is buried under between 6,500 to 13,100 feet of ice. The mountains were discovered in 1958. Scientists noted a thin patch of ice and some weird gravity readings while crossing the continent. Even though no one has ever seen those mountains directly, researchers use radar to map their shape and gravitational and magnetic readings to study them all the way to their base. Perhaps the craziest part is that the Gamburtsis are around 1 billion years old. So, in theory, they should have eroded away long ago. How they're still standing is a mystery. Most scientists think a frozen mantle beneath the ice might be protecting them from erosion, keeping this ancient range intact. And finally, Antarctica has its own soundtrack. The Ross Ice Shelf, the continent's largest ice shelf, is several hundred feet thick and spreads over 193,000 square miles, roughly the size of France. And scientists have recently discovered that this massive ice slab actually sings. The eerie melody comes from wind blowing over snow dunes, which creates vibrations in the ice and a nearly continuous seismic hum. You can't hear it with your ears, but seismic sensors pick up the mournful tune. In fact, it was discovered by accident. Scientists just installed special sensors to monitor other ice behaviors. Now, even cooler, the song changes depending on what's happening on the ice. Melting, storms, and shifting snow all tweak the vibrations. Researchers are now using this haunting melody as a kind of early warning system. They listen to it in real time to track the ice shelf stability and potential collapse.
What if we're not the only technological species on Earth? No, don't side-eye the person next to you. I'm pretty sure they're human. I'm talking about a whole advanced society that might have lived millions of years before us and then vanished. Yeah, it's a bold theory, but it's possible. Which brings up a big question. If they really existed, would we even be able to tell? Because, let's be honest, we are fascinated by the idea of finding intelligent life on other planets. So much so, we almost ignore the possibility that an advanced civilization might have existed right here on Earth. Long before humans evolved. Before dinosaurs even. And there might be hidden clues pointing to them. But where? That's exactly what the Silurian hypothesis tries to figure out. The name Silurian comes from an advanced extraterrestrial race on the TV show, Doctor Who. But the real-world idea is a little different. Scientists aren't really asking whether a pre-human civilization existed or not. They're asking something trickier. If they did exist, would we have any way of knowing? In other words, do we even have the necessary tools to find out? You see, it is possible they did exist. Take the human race, for example. We started building industries and using machines back in the 18th century. Our technology has come a long way since then, and it's grown to the point that, well, it's giving us a bit of trouble right now. All that progress is starting to impact the planet's climate and ecosystems. And if things keep going that way, one day, humanity could disappear. Sure, it's an apocalyptic, hypothetical scenario, but hey, it's just to illustrate the theory, okay? So let's picture today's world without humans around to keep things running. At first, nothing would really change, but slowly, little problems would start to snowball. Oil refineries and nuclear plants might keep going for a while until a jam here, a broken valve there, and suddenly disaster strikes with explosions, smoke, and fire tearing through the sky. Over time, pavement would split open, letting tiny green sprouts poke through. A few seasons later, those sprouts would grow into weeds, then bushes, and eventually trees strong enough to tear roads apart. At some point, our concrete jungles would turn into real green ones. And it wouldn't stop there. Bridges, buildings, entire skylines would crumble. Even the things we think will last forever, like plastic, would, over time, be swallowed by the Earth. Fast forward a few 100 million years, and Earth has completely resurfaced. Any direct evidence of our society would be long gone. Fossil evidence would fade away, and thanks to erosion and shifting tectonic plates, even our biggest cities would vanish in the blink of an eye, at least in geological terms. Now imagine Earth becomes home to a brand new intelligent civilization, and the scientists of this future species are trying to prove that we, humans, once existed. Let me tell you, they would have a ton of work ahead of them. That's because without any actual human-made objects left behind, they'd have to look for the geological fingerprints of our activities. In other words, features in rocks or minerals that tell scientists what happened on Earth long ago. They might check for unusual spikes of carbon, for example, but even then, the clues wouldn't be crystal clear, for reasons I will get to in a second. For now, my point is, it'd be just as hard for us to uncover traces of an ancient technological species. We wouldn't find any statues, no buildings, because nothing will be left standing after millions of years. Still, if they existed, they would have had the same basic needs as modern humans. They'd need to generate massive amounts of energy and grow tons of food. And that would have left behind similar geological fingerprints. Things like big spikes in atmospheric carbon, sudden climate shifts, rising sea levels. And if we ever found any of those traces, bingo! That could mean a pre-human intelligent civilization once existed. Sounds easy, right? Well, that's where the Silurian hypothesis comes in. Back in 2018, two scientists decided to put that idea to the test. Physicist Adam Frank and climate modeler Dr. Gavin Schmidt wanted to answer one big question. If an advanced civilization lived on Earth long ago, would we even be able to tell? And the answer is, well, probably not. Finding solid evidence for a civilization that old would be incredibly difficult, and there are two big reasons for that. First, because it's hard to tell when those geological fingerprints are human-made and when they're the result of natural forces. I mean, did the temperature rise during a certain period because of industries, or was it just a natural phenomenon? Here's an example. What's happening to our climate right now looks a lot like certain events in Earth's past called hyperthermals. One of those happened about 55 million years ago, when global temperatures shot up by around 14 degrees Fahrenheit. But hyperthermals usually happen during times of intense tectonic activity, when Earth's plates were shifting and volcanoes were going wild. So in that case, it was natural. But you get the point, right? Maybe there were other events like that in a much older era, that in a rare and unlikely scenario could have been caused by an ancient society. But it would be difficult to tell. There's a reason we might never find their traces. The longer an advanced civilization lasts, the more evidence it leaves behind. But here's the twist. To last that long, they would need to be sustainable. And the more sustainable a society is, the smaller the impact it leaves on the planet. Smaller impact means fewer clues for us to find. Can you see the paradox? The civilizations most likely to survive the longest are the ones that leave the least behind. For example, a society that runs mostly on wind and solar power wouldn't leave nearly as much evidence as one powered by fossil fuels. Okay, so we've got our answer. It would be really hard, if not impossible, to find any evidence that an ancient technological civilization lived here before us. But that doesn't mean they never existed. The truth is, we still don't have proper tools to look that far back into Earth's history in detail. So, maybe we should keep an open mind. Up until now, you've probably pictured this ancient civilization as humanoids, right? You know, 2 legs, 2 arms, walking around like us. But some scientists like to play with a different idea. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. What if they were sea creatures? I'm talking about cephalopods, ocean animals like octopuses, cuttlefish, and squid. These guys have complex nervous systems and surprisingly sophisticated behavior. They can change color and skin patterns in seconds, send signals like "I'm angry," and even hypnotize their prey. So what if they were the ancient civilization we've been talking about this whole time? Let's start with the light version of the theory. These species could have learned to live together in an organized way, and just like early humans, they might have changed their environment, maybe by farming underwater and hunting some species until they were gone. Maybe that could count as an early stage of a society. Even if that were the case, they never reached what we'd call an advanced stage of civilization. I mean, we don't see squids building spacecraft or octopuses working in IT. They never went through an industrial age or a space age. And if they're not a technological society, then they're not the answer to the Silurian hypothesis. So yeah, we're still left with nothing. And in the scientific community, this whole idea's even got a funny nickname: the most interesting hypothesis that's probably false. But here's the thing. Even if it's a long shot, it still gets scientists asking a big question. What will we humans leave behind millions of years from now? And the answers might actually help us figure out how to look for other advanced species beyond Earth, ones that could have disappeared a long time ago.